July 24th, will you please stand for Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The agenda is one item tonight to discuss pending Starwood legislation and consider possible terms of a memorandum of understanding with Starwood. I know the members of the board are aware that myself, Town Council Lauren Goldberg, and Rick LaFont, before he went on vacation, met with Starwood last Thursday to go over some of the items that we had concerns about. I addressed everything to them. Myself, we all did, about the concerns that were brought up at the Selectmen's meeting. I think that was Tuesday or Wednesday whenever we met. So I passed those concerns on to Starwood. They came back with a memorandum of agreement, a proposed memorandum of agreement that I think was all sent to you folks. We asked them to kind of do the same thing that they did with the towns of Rockland and Weymouth. So we have that. That was distributed to members, and I know that some members had some comments, and I know that the town council reached out to myself, Rick and Dory, and the members to see what they wanted added and if they had any concerns. And my understanding is that today, earlier today, maybe I'm wrong in the time frame, but that town council, who is present tonight, it's actually Lauren was unable. She's had some issues, but Greg Corbo is with us tonight. And he, I believe, on the phone, had a conversation with Matthew Berry and Robin Daniels, I believe, and he can delve into this, but addressing some of our concerns that the memorandum of agreement that they presented, and we tried to fine-tune that and add some more different language. So what I'm going to do is, just for the TV cameras, we do have Joe Shea, who is one of the representatives to the Tri-Town in the audience, and Rick is still on vacation, and Dory's here tonight. Greg, do you want to briefly touch over what happened this morning? You had a conversation, correct?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Coyle, and through you, Mr. Chair. For those of you who don't know me personally, I'm Greg Corbo from Coleman and Page. I work closely with Lauren, and I've been involved in some of the discussions regarding this particular project. And so, just to back up a little bit from before today, since your meeting of last week, Starwood proposed a memorandum of agreement between the master developer and the town of Abington in order to get the town to endorse the amendments to the special legislation. And I think that you all have seen that document. I know that you have in front of you my red line version of that document. And so we took a look at this, and the first thing we did was compare it to the agreement that they have in the works with the town of Rockland, and noticed that there were significant benefits going to Rockland that weren't being offered to Abington in that first draft. So based on concerns that have been raised by the town, we went through that initial document and recommended that provisions be added in order to protect the town of Abington from the impacts of this project. And, you know, the concerns that have been expressed are that, you know, the impacts to the town of Abington in terms of finances and ability to provide essential governmental services within its own borders are going to be compromised if this development goes forward as planned, and that the amount of tax revenue that may come in from this project is not going to be sufficient to protect the town's interests in that respect. So what we tried to do is go in and put in some provisions that would provide the town with ongoing host community fee payments, as well as additional mitigation payments to accommodate this excess burden that the town will be taking on as a result of the special legislation. And, you know, it's important to understand that under the legislation as it's written now, the town has no obligations with respect to what happens there, okay? The way it's being amended is we get to collect tax revenue, but we're responsible for providing police, fire, DPW services to our portion of the facility, for maintaining any roads that go in there, and for providing mutual aid to the other communities. So, while there are some added benefits to the new arrangement, there are certainly significant responsibilities of the town. So we reached out to Starwood with proposed amended language, essentially doing a few things. The first thing was ensuring that the host community fee that the town gets now, based on the development that happens out there, remains in place as originally anticipated. And the way that it works under the current agreement is that the town gets certain payments based on number of residential units that go in and square footage of commercial development. And those payments are guaranteed based on development up to $1.975 million. Okay. Now, when I say guaranteed, they're not guaranteed in that you're going to get $1.97 million, but guaranteed in that as development goes on, you're entitled to those payments up to the ceiling. No guarantee you'll ever get to the ceiling, okay? So what we tried to do was to put that back in to make sure that Abington continues to receive those payments. And in their agreement with Rockland, they agreed that if they don't reach the ceiling by a certain date, within 15 years, then Rockland could get an offset between the amount actually paid and the amount they were entitled to, up to a certain amount of money. Okay? And that provision wasn't in Abington's agreement. And there was also an alternative option that if the authority chose, instead of making that payment, they could turn over a parcel of land of equal or lesser, or just equal value. Okay? So there's that provision in there that sort of ensures ongoing host community fee payments. The second provision was for phased-in mitigation payments. So above and beyond the tax revenue, above and beyond this host community fee, Rockland would be getting $1 million paid out over, I think it's 20 years?
10 years.
10 years, okay. Paid out over 10 years, weighted more heavily towards the end. That proposal wasn't put forward to Abington at all. There was also a provision in there to pay Rockland's attorney's fees up to a certain amount in connection with the new legislation, and also to provide 2 acres of land to Rockland for open space. So the first thing we tried to do was go back and make sure that the town of Abington had an agreement that was structured in the same way that Rockland's was. So we tried to preserve Abington's entitlement to its host community fee, to make sure that if the cap is never reached, that the town gets either a flat fee payment or a land transfer, to put in a provision for this mitigation payment, and to ensure that the town gets its attorney's fees and this acreage of land turned over. So we made that proposal to Starwood, and I guess before I go on to talk about their response, does anybody have any questions about what we've talked about so far?
Oh, good.
Okay, all right. So we provided them with the draft, and you have a copy of this draft in front of you. And, the Starwood officials that we spoke with, were of the feeling that the draft we provided would give Abington more favorable treatment than would be given to Rockland under that version of the agreement. And in particular, their feeling was that they didn't like the way that we calculated the difference between the amount paid and the cap. And what they were saying was that, Rockland's not entitled to 100% of its cap. It's entitled to some lesser amount based on a reduction in the the number of commercial units that are proposed to be built under the new legislation as opposed to what was proposed under the old. And my understanding is that under the prior agreement, or the one that's in place now, there was anticipated, I think, 2 million units of commercial development, or 2 million square feet, and that's going down now to 1.1 million. So what they said was that if you don't reach your cap, we will pay you the difference between the cap and what you've been paid, or a ratio of the difference between 2 million square feet and 1.1 million square feet. And there was a number on that of, I think, 485,000. Okay? So what they said to us was, we'll do the same thing for Abington. So for Abington, if we look at the numbers, so Abington gets $138.25 per 1,000 square feet of commercial development. And so what they're saying is the difference between 2 million square feet and 900,000 is 1.1 million. Divided by 1,000 times 138.25 equals 152,075. Okay, so the way that I understand what their proposal is that if they reach full build out, we would still get the $1.975 million. If they don't, we would continue to go up gradually under the existing agreement. And at the point that they stopped, the most that we could get above that would be $152,075. And whereas in Rockland's agreement, I think it's $485,000, but their rate is $441 per 1,000 square feet, as opposed to our $138. Yes?
Do you know how they figured that ratio out, the 138.25 versus the 400 for Rockland?
So in the existing agreement that was modified in 2010, there is a series of calculations in there that describe what the town's rate is, and I believe that it's the same rate. It is the same rate. Abington would be paid $138.25 per 1,000 square feet commercial, and it's paid $594.92 per residential unit.
So that hasn't changed, that number is
That's right. My understanding is that number hasn't changed. Now, you know, I'd like to see this be more clear that in fact is the case.
Okay.
But, you know, I think, you know, the one place where we had disagreement was sort of in what's going to happen if we don't reach the cap on host community fees. And their position is that the most that we could get above, you know, the actual development would be this $152,000. Okay?
Which in the old agreement, we wouldn't have received anything. Once the construction stopped, there wouldn't have been an extra payment of this 152.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's right. Under the old agreement, we weren't guaranteed anything. The 2010 agreement.
Weren't we going to get to 1.97 million?
Well, that was the intent, but there was no guarantee that
No
that number would
guarantees.
ever be reached.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
All right. So there's that issue of, you know, are we satisfied with what they're offering in terms of a host community fee, in terms of offsetting the town's costs as compared to the revenue it expects to get from taxing its portion of the property? Okay. The second issue is on the mitigation fee. And if you look at what was proposed for the town of Rockland, over the 10 years, Rockland would receive $1 million, but it was heavily back-weighted towards the end of the agreement. And their rationale for that, as they explained it to me, was that, you know, as things stand right now, there's no development in either Rockland or Abington. But as you go forward into the future, it's anticipated that there's going to be more significant development on the Rockland side. So they anticipated giving Rockland a small amount up front because there's that access road that runs through the property and discharges out into Rockland. So they said, all right, we know you're going to have some impact from that, so we're going to give you $200,000 up front, then nothing in the next 3 years, and then as development really starts to kick in, you'll get the rest of the money. So what they're saying to Abington is, well, up front, you know, you don't have the access road going through, and you don't have any development there currently, but they're willing to give us $100,000 up front to cover those first 4 years. And then going forward, you know, their position is, under zoning the way it is now, you know, it's not anticipated that there's going to be any significant amount of development on the Abington side, and therefore Abington shouldn't be entitled to any additional mitigation payment, because the host community fee combined with the taxes should be sufficient to cover any costs that Abington may have. Okay? And again, to be clear, this is me conveying the message
Yes.
from them. Okay?
You see some stairs going at you there?
So that's their position on the mitigation payment. They're willing to pay our attorney's fees, and they're willing to give us an acre of land for recreational use. And in exchange for that, they want Abington's support for the amendment to the special legislation, and that's, you know, that's pretty much all. And obviously, you know, for you to take on all of these additional burdens, which are going to be assigned to you when the legislation is passed.
Greg, can I ask a very simple question?
Sure.
Ken, if you don't mind?
Yep.
When they say they're willing to give such and such acreage to us, I thought all the land was either owned by Weymouth or Rockland or Abington. Where is this land that they're going to give up?
So under the special legislation, although the land is in Abington, Weymouth, and Rockland, it's actually going to be owned by Starwood.
Okay.
Okay, and so any development that takes place is going to require a transfer of ownership from Starwood to some other party.
Okay.
Yes.
Is this their bottom line?
My sense is that this was their bottom line. You know, I think that the situation that you're in terms of timing is their agreement with Rockland is already a done deal. I don't know if it's signed, but in their eyes, it's been negotiated over time. You know, Rockland is satisfied with it. Weymouth has a similar agreement that they're satisfied with, and they made it abundantly clear to me that Abington's not going to get a better deal than those other two towns got. And
I understand that we wouldn't get a better deal, but can we get a better deal than what they've offered at this point?
well, we can try, you know, and what they're saying to me is that this deal, although the numbers are lower, is proportionally equal to what Rockland's got.
I get that.
And my understanding is they would be willing to meet with us, but they don't really want to meet with us in open session. And we can't really.
Can't.
And I'm unwilling to meet with them in executive session.
They did mention to me several times that, you know, they want to be speaking directly with the board rather than through council as an intermediary. But, you know, I explained to them that meeting has to be in open session. And they didn't say, no, we won't meet with them in open session. So, you know, if you find that it's useful to you to have them sitting here and, you know, explaining this in their words, but by all means, I can set that up and make that happen, you know, as soon as is convenient for you.
All right. I guess we're faced with the issue that we had the other night. We have two ways we can vote to, well, now we have three, because we can vote to, yes, we agree to this memorandum of agreement. No, we agree to it, but we want to see some changes, or against this legislation, and we vote no. That's my take on the matter, but go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, Greg, I just, a couple of comments. First, I don't know who offered some of these changes, but I would commend putting in, because when I looked at Rockland, it's clear in here, it's not the Abington Selectmen, but, any sort of water rights that are secured go through the Abington-Rockland Joint Waterworks, and I think that's a nice clarification. The other thing that I would say, is a concern to Rockland, in Section 8 here, land on recreational facilities. Basically, what they're saying is the master developer will provide certain lands to Abington of which they can construct for recreational facilities. But I like the amendment that in doing so, the master developer has to, at their own cost, clean up any environmental contaminants. And I know Rockland had an issue with that. I'm not sure if that got put into theirs.
Okay.
As far as just kind of at a higher level, so in effect, Rockland has about 42% of the area over there, and they were offered mitigation fees of $1 million. Abington has about 12% at $100,000. Now, I can understand the disproportion of it, right? Abington might have 12%, but much of it is not considered buildable or it's open space. But my reaction is I think they need to sharpen their pencil a little bit, at least to get, my vote. The other thing that I'm concerned as people know, is the water. And again, I would just cite some concerns that Joe raised. And again, right now, we're pumping over our allocation from the Department of Environmental Protection. And I believe the Water Department has applied to increase the gallonage. But as Mr. Shea points out, that the Water Commissioners indicate they want about 500,000 more gallons per day to use. And, if we're already over by 300,000 gallons, that only leaves a couple of 100,000 gallons for use. And if Southfield gets that $200,000 gallons of water, that leaves very little, if none, for Abington and development. I'm not too, crazy about that. And the other thing that I think Mr. Shea brings up, which I think is a valid point, is I can see how the developer would cover any cost on the Southfield property for water or wastewater treatment. But the question is, what if Abington-Rockland Joint Waterworks needs to improve our infrastructure distribution or our water supply? Are they going to pay for that? And again, that's another concern that I would have. But Mr. Chairman, I don't know. I don't think that it's in a form that at least I'm willing to go forward with at this point.
Andy?
A couple, just this projected revenue estimate, who prepared this, do you know? As far as the tax,
Starwood,
did these are their figures?
based on South Shore Tri-Town Development Corp. estimates.
Do you know what they use for an assessment as far as?
I don't, but it's my understanding, and I try to get clarification on this, and Joe might be able to speak to this without giving away too much. They've actually asked for abatements on what they're paying for, what the land up there is assessed for. Is that, you want to come to the microphone and answer that, if you know the answer? Or if town council knows, or, I think that before Rick went on vacation, he was looking into the abatement issue.
I believe the fact that you cannot discuss what somebody has requested on an abatement. I am correct, the fact that somebody has applied for an abatement is public information. They have applied for abatements to the Tri-Town Board of Assessors, and when that was rejected, they've gone to Poll Tax Board. So I can't say what the amounts they're asking for are, but they have asked for abatements on the values that are now set.
And I'm not certain whether this says this was based on South Shore Tri-Town Development Corp. estimates. Was that when there was going to be a golf course in place, or after they've changed that plan? Also, is it before the abatement, what they anticipated to be the value of the property? And also, does that include a potential, it probably does not, but a potential wastewater treatment plant on there, which I would think would bring the tax revenue up?
Can I just ask a question about that?
Yes.
What taxes are they assessed at this point? I thought that the town wasn't assessing them taxes yet.
The Tri-Town Development Corporation assesses the taxes to them. That's how Tri-Town kind of sustains themselves.
I see, okay.
So they're the
tax on
taxing
Abington,
authority.
Rockland, and Weymouth property.
Right.
Okay.
You know, this
Okay, so
legislation-
Tri-Town is assessing the taxes, and
Exactly.
that's been appealed.
Yes.
Yes.
I see.
And then when it
Correct, Joe?
And then when it comes, this legislation passes, Abington will
That's
will
right.
be sending out the tax bill with a little
We send out a tax bill
hand.
based on our own
Right.
tax rate and also.
So it's a surcharge.
And based on Abington's assessment of the property versus Tri-Town's assessment of the property.
Well, I mean, we would have to determine what the assessment is.
Right.
With the property.
But Abington's going to be doing that, not Tri-Town any longer.
Yes. Well, you know, I mean, it's not what all, you would have a legal right to appeal any assessment.
And one other question, I don't know if you know this, Greg, or not. Joe, you may. They say that the offer is lower because of the fact that no development in Abington is currently contemplated. But my understanding is there is no master plan at this point for the next phase until this legislation passes. Is that the case? They're gonna-
Said they would not, my understanding is, Starwood said they will not issue a new plan until the legislation passes.
So we actually don't know if there is any
Same discussion of a wastewater plant on the Abington portion. Now we only start with right.
but which Abington would be responsible for fire protection and police protection and that sort of
One
thing.
thing that's crucial, and I think it was something you read earlier, it's not only what we're responsible for on our property, but mutual aid.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand that.
The other costs, obviously, these are all the costs, you know, I mentioned, it's going to cost the treasurer's office, it's going to cost the assessor's office, it's going to cost the building inspector's office, board of health, whole series of departments.
So that kind of concerns me, the fact that there is no master plan. We don't know exactly what is going to be there, if there is going to be anything there. And they're not going to, I don't think it's very fair for them to expect for us to make a decision on a deal that we don't know all the answers to, all the questions.
One other comment on that, on development, some of the mitigation, my understanding was the mitigation people also based on traffic. A lot of estimates I saw said that.
Joe, can you go on, because the people at home,
All right.
Joseph Shays, 3 Wyman Road, been involved in the airbase since 1990. My understanding of mitigation fees was based on the impacts to the towns, which, overall. It wasn't just based on who, what the development was going to be, but there were going to be issues to the towns, regardless how much development was in their portion. The last estimate I saw when we got the East-West Parkway put in was it was approximately 30% of the traffic was going to use that. The other 70% is going to be on Route 18. So that has an impact on Abington in many ways, on our streets, on our public service, on our police, fire, and highway. There were probably other issues involved for it. We're going to have construction trucks coming to and from Abington. So I think the idea to say that, you're not going to have any, we're going to have impact from the development, and that is what the mitigation, or my understanding was, it was originally set up to do. A couple other quick questions. So I think to say there is no significant development in Abington. Number one, as Andy said, if we don't know what the plan is. Number two, there is development impact in Abington. And we talked about the Rockland amount. Weymouth has 48% on the base. They've got $3 million in mitigation. So I think.
well, that's a good point, if they're using the percentage of land in each particular town as how they're developing this payments in Rockland.
And how does Weymouth get 48% of the land and $3 million?
I agree, yeah, if that's how they're.
I mean, it's almost like the first town to agree to endorse the plan got the approval, got the most money. And the one who was, in my personal opinion, was looked at as having the most political clout, got the most money. One other question, somebody mentioned something about Starwood does not want to, and I think it was answered by Greg. Any agreement like this, I would think, has to be signed in open session. Could not, I don't see how you could sign, my understanding, you could not sign an agreement such as this you have to come out at least in.
Announce the fact- oh, yeah.
We have no intention of.
Okay, because, well, basically, that is what they, based on what I've seen, that's what they tried to, even though it was an open meeting, they basically did not want public comment in Rockland. I think, I seriously have a problem with that. But that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, as to the open meeting issue, I mean, unfortunately, we can't even talk amongst ourselves about this in executive session, let alone, enter into negotiations or execute an agreement. So everything that you do as a board needs to be done in open session from now up until the time the agreement's signed. Yes?
Rick, just to get back to your earlier comment on 40B, I thought I heard you just say there's nothing in the legislation about 40B development on any portion of the base. My question would be, if that's true, would that prohibit any 40B development, which is bypasses any local zoning limits? It's one thing if it's not in there, but does that prevent the developer from filing a 40B? And
Do you have the proposal in front of you?
yes, I do.
Okay, so if you look at proposed section 32, what's the way?
I'm sorry, the legislation?
The legislation, yeah.
I don't have a legislation.
Okay, I can read it. It's pretty short. So section 32 says, Chapter 40B of the general laws shall not apply to the provision of affordable housing within NAS South Weymouth redevelopment area. Such affordable housing within NAS South Weymouth redevelopment area shall be governed by section 14.2, the zoning bylaws and the regulations adopted hereunder. None of the land located within NAS South Weymouth redevelopment area, nor any of the housing which may be constructed thereon from time to time, shall be included in any calculation applicable to said 40B with respect to any of the towns.
So in effect, they explicitly excluded, and that's legal?
Yeah, that's why you do this through special legislation, because you get to decide which parts of the general laws you want to have apply to you and which ones you don't.
Yeah.
And it's my understanding that, there are other provisions of this agreement in which they guarantee that there will be a certain amount of affordable housing.
And one other question. If we were to elect to sign this, and let's say the Abington-Rockland Joint Waterworks couldn't come to an agreement to supply water, would this prohibit any sort of mitigation or exclude any sort of mitigation payment if that didn't happen? In other words, are we being guaranteed if it's 100,000 or whatever, regardless of whether both parties, Abington, Rockland Joint Waterworks, and Starwoods, can come to an agreement?
No, it's my understanding that the whatever payments you get out of this are irrespective of whether or not water is supplied. Frankly, the way that I read this, they look at it as if they're giving you a benefit by being able to supply them with water. And obviously, that's not the case. And frankly, you don't have any say over whether water is supplied or not. The Joint Waterworks is its own independent entity. So it's really something that's beyond your control as a Board of Selectmen.
Thank you.
Yes, Dory, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to reiterate the deep concerns of the fire chief and the police chief, and that's not a monetary figure, but a response time, that if they're called up there, then we receive a call down here, it's very distressing, the length of time to take, especially on Route 18 with the traffic, to get to a call here if they're up there. And that's a real big concern on both police and fire, the safety and response times. I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware of that.
We keep talking about mitigation, and I just want to, this is actually from Greg, but in his meeting today, he said that Starwood is not concerned that Abington will suffer impacts that will not be compensated by taxation. They do not believe that Abington is entitled to compensation for its mutual aid obligations, since these obligations exist with or without an agreement. Likewise, they cite the lack of impact on schools and local roads. They believe that the improvements to Route 18 and more direct access to Route 3 is a benefit to the residents of Abington. They also, okay, so that's their the way they're standing on this issue, we're not gonna give you any, we're gonna give you $100,000 for mitigation, because we don't feel that you need to be mitigated for anything, so.
Yeah, and if I could just expand on that a bit, and again, this is me trying to summarize their position, not certainly stating mine, but, you know, the way they look at it is, you know, you have this certain amount of land that's in Rockland and Weymouth. If that land had been independently developed by Rockland, you would have mutual aid obligations, and if, you know, if there was a call there that triggered a requirement of mutual aid, you'd have to send it, and you wouldn't get any mitigation payments from Rockland as a result of that. So their position is, if you wouldn't get it from Rockland for any other part of Rockland, why should you get it from them for this part?
Any board members, Maureen?
I just had a couple things. Back to the mitigation thing, too. I mean, what's in here is that they're acknowledging the elimination of their requirement to construct a golf course or other recreational facilities. If the 100,000 is to mitigate, is mitigation basically to kind of set up what we're going to have to do to collect taxes or whatever, early stages, they're not giving any mitigation view, or if you will, to the fact that they're eliminating this kind of thing, the golf course. I'm not saying, you know, whether they should or shouldn't, but if they're eliminating the golf course and it was going to be on our land and we were going to get revenue from it, could we put that back to them and say, well, you're taking that off the table? Maybe that could, what was their thought there?
Well, what they said to me in response to that was that, well, under the prior agreement, Abington didn't get anything as a result of the golf course being there.
Okay.
Whereas, because you weren't collecting taxes on that property. And so now, you know, it's not anticipated that there'll be a golf course. Maybe there will be, maybe there won't be. But, you know, whatever does go there ultimately increases Abington's revenue by being able to assess more taxes.
My only response is that they're trying to argue both sides of the agreement here. Your previous comment was, well, if Rockland was building there, then you'd have mutual aid, but the prior legislation, Rockland wasn't building there, South Shore Tri-Town was, and I'm not sure that we would have provided mutual aid at that point, because I think they had to build a fire station.
A private force, yes.
Right within that particular, so that's okay to argue that side when it's good for them, it's okay to argue the other side when it's good for them, so it's a little disingenuous in my mind that,
Joe?
Two things. One of disingenuous. The first thing is, Maureen touched upon something. The original plans, which were approved, call for development of playing fields up there that could be used by all three towns. They were going to be developed by the developer or by Tri-Town. That is gone. That would have given us more playing fields that we could have used. They have pulled out of that agreement. So whether or not they say we don't need a golf course, what about the other playing fields they pulled out of? The other question on the mutual aid, this original whole project in 1995 was done working with the Navy, and the base closing model was to try and work, if the state did not want to do it, was work with the three towns as a unit. So basically the whole plan from the start was it would be a joint project with each town's interest protected. If not, there may never been a plan to develop the base. We might have just said leave it fallow. Let it go to become open space. Because we knew that if the base started to be developed, there were going to be concerns for all three towns that you're going to have costs. And the desire was to prevent those costs from overwhelming the town's resources. In the first few years, I'd be honest with you, I think the plan as developed, to what I see happening, we're going to have problems. Rockland is going to have much more serious problems. They're going to have to maintain that east-west parkway at some point. They have to maintain one of the other roads that are servicing them. They're going to have much more problems up front. But we're going to have problems. And the idea originally, and I know we're arguing about probably a dead thing because of the way the legislature has reacted. But to say that they, basically what they have done is changed, Starwood has changed what the towns want to do.
no, absolutely they have. There's
So
no
to
doubt
say
about
that they're not concerned about the mutual aid issue and the impact on our resources. What do we do if we have a fire up there that we got to respond to, and then we have a fire here that we can't respond to in time or emergency? What do we tell those people? It was for the good of Starwood? I hate to get that cruel on it, but that's what
Andy?
I don't know if you know this. Do you know where the legislation stands as far as how far along it is? We're coming, what is the date today, the 24th? They've got 7 days left to, and actually tomorrow's a Friday, and then you've
Yeah,
got, so we've
got
got
till
about...
Thursday of next week.
Yeah. Do you know?
My
Greg, or-
understanding is that it's very close at this point.
That's
So-
what they're telling you?
Well, yeah, I mean, they didn't give me an exact date, but they said they anticipate that it's going to be passed next week.
Really?
I don't know that much, it's in the Ways and Means now? Does that mean?
It is, yeah.
So one of the things we can talk about is, sort of separate and apart from this agreement, is whether there are any amendments to the legislation itself that we would want to propose on behalf of Abington, knowing that it's very late in the game, and obviously the legislature is not going to go for any major amendments, but, are there things in here that, you'd like to see part of the legislation that, you could offer through your legislative delegation as an amendment? And I know one of the things that Lauren and I talked about was, having a provision in there that allows Abington to issue liquor licenses, because Weymouth and Rockland are able to issue liquor licenses, but Abington's not. And yeah, maybe today it's not anticipated that there would be that type of development, but maybe in the future there will be. So, that would be something that we could offer as an amendment. Another thing we could offer would be to put something in that, sort of requires Starwood to put in a certain amount of, commercial development in the Abington portion. Or at least, look at putting some of the commercial development in the Abington portion so that, you do have a potential to get some revenue out of this. And then there's the representation issue, and, whether you want to try to make some amendments that give you a greater voice at the table, more so than you have now. So those are things that we should talk about, obviously, sooner rather than later. And, maybe we should talk about timing a little bit. Really, I think if this is going to be put into effect on Thursday, you probably want to meet on Tuesday to sort of give your final, this is what we want to do on this. And so
Meet with them or meet just amongst us?
Well, that's up to you. I mean, it probably wouldn't hurt to hear them out and, have them here in this room and in front of the cameras, to explain their position and, to explain to you in their words why they feel that your concerns are adequately met before you take a vote on this, and give you an opportunity to respond to that. And I think what we can do is, as we sit here tonight, maybe come up with a proposal to give back to them.
I think that's a good idea.
And say, all right, here's our, we put something forward to you earlier in the week, you responded to it, we don't think that's sufficient, this is what we're willing to do. And then have them come back here on Tuesday and say, all right, no, this is our last best offer, and then you have an opportunity to say, all right, well, we're willing to take your last best offer, or no, we can't support, what you're trying to do there.
Question, Greg, the $100,000 payment that they're proposing, when is that going to be paid? Year one, year two, or over that 1 to 4 year period in $25,000 increments, do you know? Did they
Year
get-
one,
All up front?
yes.
Well, at least you get better value with $100,000 in year one than you do in year 4, but I still don't think that, I don't think that's enough
Yeah, it's small.
as far as,
Well, there's other issues we haven't touched upon either. It's the representation of the one vote on the board, which, Rockland had the same problem too, and they're supposed to get it worked out, but does the board want to, take a vote, or?
Can I just ask the question, though, as far as amendments to the legislation, would purchase of some sort of equipment, I'm thinking more public safety, is that sort of a, feasible, or is that something that, would be frowned upon?
In the legislation
Yeah, in
itself?
the
or the
legislation.
agreement? There's nothing really in the legislation that addresses that issue. There's really nothing in the legislation that talks about mitigation to the towns. And it seems to me like the mechanism for that is to do it through this agreement. That's not to say we couldn't ask for an amendment that required Starwood to, buy you a piece of equipment. Obviously, I don't know where that would go.
But I'm just coming at it from, I sit here with 7 days left, I see our position as being tenuous, but if we signal to our legislation, rep, senator, that, this is something that we would want, would that provide a better negotiating position that they potentially could, come up the works until, something like that was added to the legislation? Because I've seen before how legislation comes down, and something's earmarked, or, from a budget viewpoint. So I'm not sure if something like that can be, affected. Because my sense is Starwood's has got what they need. They got, Rockland and Weymouth, right? And Abington is sort of not on the radar to them now. I think their position is this is going to go forward with us or without us. And I'm just, from a negotiating viewpoint,
We don't have a lot of leverage, but I think
No.
they wouldn't be sitting and talking to us if they weren't willing
Yeah.
to do something, right? And they wouldn't have made this proposal if they weren't willing to do something. So my thought is, I think Greg's right. I think we come up with a counter proposal and let them chew on it and see what they say. I can tell you what my thought on one aspect here. 1 acre of land for recreational use is, that's not a lot of land for recreational. You can't do much with 1 acre of land, so I would go back to them and say we want what did we propose initially, 5?
I put 5, because even a soccer field's a little over 2.
Yeah.
A big soccer field, so I mean,
I talked to them about that, and they said, look, we're giving Rockland 2, we're not giving you 5.
but Rockland's is for public safety, if I remember correctly, because might need a police or fire presence there, so it's not for open space or for recreation, so I think it's a completely different animal.
Yeah, what can you use an acre of land for recreation? An acre is not...
Well, if we get the liquor license, no.
so what are you thinking as far as mitigation?
Well, again, if we go back and, obviously the 25,000, they're willing to pay our attorney's fees, that's a good thing. That's, we're okay with that, I would think, right? The 1 acre of land, to me, that's not sufficient. And then the $100,000 is, to me, not sufficient as far as the mitigation goes. I'm not sure on this formula for the, what are they calling it? The host community payments. If you could maybe just check to make sure that that actually jives with what the current legislation is.
Sure. So, I guess let's take it one item at a time.
Yeah.
All right. So as to the host community payment, we want to make sure that, right, at the very least, you have what you're entitled to now, right? Which is nothing guaranteed, but, it's a payment based on rate of development for both commercial and for residential.
And if this develops the way they think it's going to develop, it's a boom for us. It's a good thing for Abington compared to what the money that's been coming in dribs and drabs right now.
So there's going to be a benefit when it's...
Yes.
That's right. And so that, if we can get them to agree that, under the original agreement, you could earn up to $1.975 million, and that you will continue to have that earning potential under the new agreement, plus a guarantee that if you don't get to the 1.9, you can get this additional 275,000. Is that something that's acceptable to you on that piece? Or do you think that piece should be increased in some way?
To me, if you're asking me individually, I'd say that's acceptable, yes. I don't know.
Yep.
Could go along with that.
Yep. I mean, those are the terms anyways. I mean, if you look at this memorandum of agreement in 2010, those figures are the same figures that are on here, so I think that's We can take a sense of the board vote, if we have any sense, but I think that's what we agreed to, majority.
Okay, and again, you know, this is sort of contingent on them confirming that that's the case, because they did send me an email early, after our phone conversation, you know, in which they said the 1.975 that was used was the total potential host community agreement payments left to pay Abington at the time of the First Amendment, and included both residential and commercial. As we discussed, residential is paid out in the amount of $594.92 per unit, and commercial is paid out at $138.25 per 1,000 square feet. So, I don't know, I mean, I'd like to see this be more clear-cut, that that's, you know, I think that from the beginning, the total that we could earn was, I think, 233.
2,335,000 it says here.
335.
Yeah.
So what we want to know is that we still have the potential to get to that 2,335,000, recognizing that some of it has been paid already, and that we can continue to earn up to that number. And if we don't, we can get either the additional 275 or the equivalent in land. Is that something that's acceptable to you?
I would say so.
Okay.
Joe?
I have a question. They're going to give us $594 per residential unit, correct? They're still planning on 2,800 square residential units. So I would think that's going to mean we're going to get approximately 1.4 for that, plus whatever we get for commercial. So, I mean, we were talking about something that we're proposing 157,000.
Well, but don't forget, it's capped. So, you know, you get $594 per residential unit,
Right.
$138 per 1,000 square feet of commercial, up to a total of
$2.3.
$3 million. Once you reach that $2.3 million, you get nothing more.
Right.
Okay, that was under the agreement from 2007, as amended in 2010. You've already gotten 744,000 of that.
Okay.
So you've got, I don't know what that means you have left, but
1.6, a little less.
Okay, so that's the maximum that you can earn.
But I've been hearing a figure of 157,000. I would assume if they develop the residential alone, without any commercial, that we would be getting, you know, we would be getting somewhere at least 700,000. Because, you know, that's what I'm concerned about. We've gotten, if you developed all the residential at 544, it'd be approximately $1.5 million.
Yeah, so I think that's the intent here, is that, you know, we'd keep going up to our cap.
Right.
But if we don't reach our cap, we could get up to whatever that number is.
52?
276,000 additional dollars.
Well, why would it be only 276,000? That would mean they've developed almost nothing in residential.
Well,
But that, I mean, that's going to be up to them as to whether or not they do develop it.
Okay, you know, I mean, if they develop nothing, yeah.
so
okay.
let's say, for example, we're entitled to a maximum of $2.3 million.
Right.
Okay? And over time, we get paid $2 million.
Okay,
Okay? And then they say, we're done. We're not doing anything more. Under this agreement, we wouldn't ever get to the 2.3, but we could get to 2.276.
yeah, that's fine. I just want to hear 276. I don't know where that figure is coming from, because, I mean, that almost, you know, I mean, I think I'm confused, but I think we need a clear explanation of how they're doing that computation.
And that's why I think it's probably beneficial to have them come in
Yeah.
and explain that to you. But, so, I think as we sit here
As
today.
far as the concept goes,
As far-
I think.
Okay, so, we're on board with that as long as we have in place what we had before, plus this small amount in addition, we can live with that host community fee.
Yep.
Okay, so now the question turns to the mitigation, and clearly, they're not gonna go up to $1 million, and you're not satisfied with 100,000. So how do we bridge that gap? What's a reasonable way to bridge that gap.
Split it in the middle.
Okay.
Is that realistic, or is that a
Well,
non-starter?
that's the hard part about doing this in open session. They can sit down and watch this and say, how do they get to that figure?
Exactly.
As I said before, I do like the fact they're giving us $100,000 up front. I think that's good instead, you
Better than
know,
spreading it out.
that's money now, but, you know,
So I can think of two things, and,
100
you
over
know,
400, 100 over 4 years.
Because, you know, the other thing that I heard is that, you know, they're looking at the percentage of land, but it seems to me there's other factors there. And again, my understanding is they're building out another town over there, 7,000 people, which is, you know, we've heard, that's going to increase mutual aid and, you know, traffic.
Traffic on our roads.
You know, especially where all those people now, not only from Southfield, but I come home that way, off of the expressway, will be coming down, piling on Route 18. Now, some of it will be beneficial, right? It'll be beneficial to business, but it won't be for residents of the town, you know, to try to negotiate that on Route 18, and that should be worth something to us. And I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for, you know, split the difference. But
Well, there's also a point that got brought up that, you know, we kind of forget about is that, and I think Andy touched upon it, is the force up there was, you know, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe Joe can attest this, but they were gonna have their own police and fire force, I thought, up there.
Yeah.
And that's no longer the case, you know, so they're gonna rely upon us. And you brought up tonight that, and the town librarian is weighing in, saying that our library is gonna be used now, which you don't even think about this stuff. And if we're just thinking about this stuff now, well, what else is gonna be used in town? That, you know, that is, Abington Little League feels gonna have to be used because they're gonna have teams up there and not, I don't know, but there's gonna be a lot of drain on services in town that we're not thinking about right now. And the police and fire are a big one. That was never anticipated, so that's what the mitigation should go for, I think. Maureen, you want to say?
I was just going to mention, with that many more folks living there and commuting on our roads, just accidents, right off the bat. I mean, aside from a fire that we have to do mutual aid, there are going to be more accidents on our roads as well. So that, in and of itself, is going to put a strain on our police and fire.
Starwood talks about Abington's reaping the benefits of easy access to Route 3. I don't see where that's happening. I mean, I don't see how...
Still have to get to I-18.
Yeah, there's no, well, that's right, there's no difference between.
Right,
Still gotta get
exactly.
to
To our
I-18.
benefit.
Yeah, that's right.
The way to get to Route 3, if you go through Rockland, is through Rockland, it's not gonna be through.
And anything that we build directly on, you know, directly as access to the Abington is going to be that breakaway gate type of thing, which is only going to be used for emergency type of thing. And there is no road there, as far as I know right now. So that doesn't help us either.
So maybe you go back to them, I don't know, what did you say?
500,000.
Hey, all we can say is
Oh,
no.
I
All I can say is
All we
no.
can
Give
say
us
is
some
no.
direction here. I mean, you know, again, I
mean,
think
if
we
they-
need to be somewhat realistic, because we've only got, you know, days,
4 days.
but I think, from my perspective, there's a lot of reasons why, you know, it would be beneficial for Abington's support on this, and to me, over the life of this project, $500,000 is not a lot of money. You know, and that right, where the Starwoods decides to sell it, I think is, you know, beneficial to them. So, I mean, I don't know, but that's my sense of it.
I think that if Abington does decide to rezone that property, then maybe in the future, there may be some things that can go up there, some commercial uses, whether it be recreation, or we'll bring in some tax revenue, but I think that's gonna be 4 or 5 years off.
At least.
So maybe we could ask for mitigation for a few of those years until we can increase the tax value of that. So maybe 100,000 for the first 4 or 5 years.
Let's spread it out.
Doesn't hurt
What
to
do you think,
ask.
Greg?
He knows.
You know, you're getting into the part of the discussion that I don't really have that much to offer. You know, I have to try to sort of read the tea leaves as to what they're going to do, and as you pointed out, we're in open session, which hampers what I'm able to say. You know, and so all I can say is that, look, you know, you've got to come up with what you think is reasonable. We don't have a lot of time here to, you know, sort of play the traditional game of, well, you know, we'll come up come up a little bit, you come down a little bit, and go back and forth until you eventually meet in the middle. So what I would suggest is, you put something out there that you think is realistic, that you think you can justify, and we get them in front of you to say why that's too much. One of the things I know that you guys were concerned about was your need to possibly buy a new fire truck. And so maybe if they're balking at, giving you a sum of money just in the abstract, maybe you say, buy us a new fire truck.
Yeah.
Then it's something that's concrete, that everybody can see, and, it costs them some money, but they get something out of it. Hey, this is the fire truck we bought for Abington to help them out with.
I'm not sure they don't
Purchased by Starwood on the side.
Yeah.
But I'm not so sure they don't get a tax benefit from that also.
Good.
It's done under a donation or whatever.
Well,
If
then,
we
you know
end
what,
up with
all
a
the more
fire truck-
reason for them to do it.
But just so you know, the fire truck is anticipated to cost up to $1.2 million, so,
Oh, really?
yeah.
Yes.
It's one of those ladder.
Okay.
But again,
ladder
to
trucks.
the point, if you come back to $500,000 and.
There's
you know,
half.
what
Buy
you're
half a
saying
fire
is you
truck.
get 100,000 up front and you structure it like Rockland, that would help, initially in and out years to utilize that money, if not for a fire truck, for some other need. So it's not like it has to be all up front. I think that it could be spread over
I agree.
several years, and I'm not sure if that should be that big a deal to them, but I don't know.
So they can either buy us a new fire truck or $100,000 for 5 years. They'll give them the option.
There's an option.
Do we
So
need,
we okay with that, or
You want to do 100,000 over a 5-year period?
100 each year? Yeah.
Over a 5-year period.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think it's unanimous on the board?
Yeah, I think that's the proposal.
Yeah,
The
go
the
back
other
to
thing I
them.
just would like to throw out, given the recreational in discussion, that 1 acre is not sufficient, but my understanding of our,
Well, let's talk about, let's end the mitigation, though. So is that, yes,
There is.
Dory?
Chairman, could I just ask a technical question of council for the mitigation piece? If we're talking the first year, our proposal was the first year be like September 15th before we set the tax rate, so that we use the money this fiscal year. Is that what we're proposing, or are we proposing what they're proposing? I think they're proposing July 1, is year 1.
As long as we get it, I don't care.
Maybe that's something we should.
Well, so they're defining year 1 as 30 days after the date upon which the town accepts responsibility for assessing taxes. So then
That adds.
I would assume
Yeah.
that wouldn't go into effect until, next year.
Okay.
It couldn't. I mean, I don't
yeah, so
think you could.
July 1st of 2015 or September 15th of 2015, I think from an assessing viewpoint, is the same thing, right?
Well, for our point, it would be, if it was September 15th, if we received, it would be before we set the tax rate, it would be for free cash for us for the fall. If it were later, July 1, then it's FY 15.
Thanks.
So we were proposing.
Oh, so they're saying July 1, 2015?
I think.
Yes.
Yeah, they are. They're saying, because that's the, because so July 1 of 2015, is the look-back date for the taxes that come out on July 1st, 2015. So what they're saying is, so on July 1st, 2015, you've got to start assessing taxes to this property. And what the agreement says is, so within 30 days of that, February 1st, 2015, that's when you would get your first payment.
Do you know if that's the way Rockland and Weymouth was structured?
Well, that's exactly the way that Rockland is structured.
And just so, when our proposal was September 15th, so that we use year 1 this year.
This
So
year.
I just wanted to make sure you're saying.
I think we
year
should
1.
try it, but for
Yeah.
me personally, I'm not sure if I'd fall on my sword if that, became a hang-up.
Did they respond to that, Greg, as far as our proposal versus their proposal, and as far as when it would be paid, or
In
that
terms of the-
$100,000 payment?
We didn't really talk about the dates or how the $1 million would be structured. We simply said to them, Rockland's getting $1 million, we want $1 million.
So why don't we stick with what you said? Stick with our original proposal and see what they come back with? And
Well, they've rejected that.
No, not the number, but the
Yeah.
date of payment. Our initial date of payment was going to be September 15th, so why won't we,
Okay,
Stick with that.
okay.
that's right? It was
Yes,
going to be
exactly.
September 15th?
That's right. And then July 1 every year after that.
Okay.
So September 15th of 2014?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. would be the first payment, and then,
Okay, so that handles the mitigation issue, correct? And Tom, you had another issue?
Well, I just, on the recreational part, and again, my understanding of the majority of our land, and I don't know, Joe, but I thought I saw some sort of parcel map, that we have 12 parcels over there, but the majority of our land is considered wet or open space.
Oh, it's all open space, but.
No, but I thought like buildable, sort of.
I've heard traditionally that we consider about 50% of the land wet, but I don't know whether or not that has been a formal, you'd have to check whether or not it's a formal thing. If it's open space, it is still developable.
Yeah.
So you have to, we got about 178 acres there. So you're talking about, if it's open space only, if it's wet, that means half it isn't. If it's not, that would still leave approximately 90 acres. One other thing in relation to the September 15th, if this is going in effect as of July 1st, 2015, work is needed, extra work is going to be needed in the town departments start in fiscal year 14, which make another reason why you want to have the money this year, because if you need to hire anybody, if you need to get help or anything like that, you have it. This is a thought, and I think you've already made it up, but to be another reason to push them on it. We need to do the work.
Well, what I was going to suggest is, again, I'm not sure of the area of a ball field, but it would seem to me that 5 acres should, would be something we would reach out and see if we could secure that sort of a,
They've already said they're not giving you 5 acres.
4.
Do I hear 3?
So, again, they gave Rockland 2, and they view your contribution as less, that they're not going to go above 1 on that.
okay.
1 acre's, where your dog park up there? I mean, and
1 acre is not-
and then that becomes Abington's responsibility. So in other words, our DPW is gonna have to go down there and
Exactly.
do whatever they have to do with
1
it?
acre's
Cut the
worth of
grass.
land.
I mean,
even worth it.
I don't even know if it's worth it either. It's an acre. I mean,
So you wanna
unless we
spread
try,
that for the
so either,
renovation?
so either that or we try to increase it,
Absolutely right,
you know?
yeah. Because you're right, it's going to be Abington's responsibility, the DPW go over there to mow 1 acre of land.
Right.
That nobody will even use.
Chairman, I just wanted to bring up too, Selectman Jansen's concern on the condition of the land. What if it needs to be cleaned up, that acre?
Well, my understanding is, and maybe I'm incorrect, is that all the cleanup is still part of the process. It's all gonna be taken care of. They're gonna- Yes, to certain standards. The runways are gonna be dug up.
But you may have to check as to what standard is being used for cleaning. In other words, not all, my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, is all will be reasonably safe, but I don't know if you would say that every acre is going to be suitable for residential use. So depending on what you want to use the 1 acre for, you might have to check what that 1 acre level use would be. Would it be suitable for, say, a ball field? And Russell's got to check to see if it would be suitable for a public safety building. Because that's my understanding of how the cleanup works. The Navy cleans up to levels. I think the understanding is pretty clear, everything we say. But I think you need to double check that.
Right, so if we stick with the 1 acre, we should make sure it's suitable. If we're gonna get rid of the 1 acre, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Is there a sense of the board for the 1 acre? Do we
Just
do we
thinking
ask
what
for
you can
2,
use,
or
what
what
you
Rockland
can-
did, or just?
Greg seems to think they're not going to go over the 1, right?
Mhm.
But is that a negotiating piece? What's 1 acre worth, 100,000?
Well, that's why, like you said, you horse trade that for
Yeah.
the 5.
They
you
keep,
know.
let them keep the land and.
And it's an extra acre on the tax rolls for our town.
That's true, too, yeah.
That's a good point, Kenny.
Yeah.
You must have been an assessor, right? One of
Yeah,
them.
and I wanna be, after this.
All right,
So we'll give that up?
I'm not opposed to giving that up.
Yeah.
If it's 1 acre, I'm not.
Are we giving it up as a trading piece, or are we just giving it up period, the
Well,
end,
he
strike
can,
it?
he can frame it as a trading piece, right?
So why you
Which
get
I
paid?
know
How
they're
much
listening
everybody
to
knows
this.
now, anyway. So much for
They're not
that.
gonna watch
If we
it.
really want it.
Oh, you want to bet?
We're willing to give it up.
They're watching now.
They're watching, exactly.
I don't think it's live, is it? Are we live?
It's
Oh, we are, oh, great.
Oh, yeah.
Why is this live?
Oh, my phone's ringing. All
Open meeting, we have, I mean, they're
Why
not.
is this live?
right, other issues in the memorandum of agreement. Did anybody?
Was that pretty much it?
I think
That was
those were
my-
the sort of issues of contention at this point.
As far as our, the legislation or amendments that we'd like to see, you brought up the liquor license thing that I brought up in our meeting, because when I read the paperwork, Weymouth gets a bunch, and Rockland gets a few, and there was no contingency for Abington. So I think it's imperative that in case, in the future, 5 years from now, we develop or change the zoning, if we want to if they decide to go with a golf course, so, we'd like to have the clubhouse possibly in Abington to get the tax revenue. So I think it's important that we, try to seek some liquor licenses.
At least try, yeah.
Yeah. The other thing, too, that Rockland had a major concern about, and I think we spoke about this at our last meeting, is representation on the board. Currently, according to the legislation, there's one representative from Abington. And believe it or not, if you combine Rockland and Abington, we have the majority of the property up there. And that would mean that only 2 votes, I think, or maybe 2, possibly 3.
3 out of 9.
3 out of 9 of the votes would be from the 2 towns combined, and that doesn't seem very representative, so. And I know that the chairman of the Rockland Board, in a letter, stated that he supports the legislation on the condition that it be revised to have equal representation from all towns, instead of 5 mayoral appointees from Weymouth. So I know that they're looking into that, so, I would suggest that, I don't know how we go about it, but I'd like to see somehow the representation be changed a little bit.
I'm not sure if it'd be in this agreement, this MOA. I think
No,
we need
but-
to-
No, but-
No, this is the legislation part of it.
Yeah.
Right.
And that would be through our state rep and our state senator to tell them that we want them to.
So what I would suggest we do on that is, why don't we talk about sort of generally the changes that you might want to see to the legislation, and maybe you take a vote to authorize the chair and council to submit a request to your legislative delegation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think the 2 points Kenny just raised, 2 that I would,
The liquor licenses and the
in
representation.
the representation.
Okay. What about, do we want to see something about the possibility of commercial development?
Yeah, I'd like to, I don't know how the wording would be, and you can help us on this, but I'd like to, Starwood speaks about maybe working with us, so I would like someone from this organization to work with representatives from Abington to work on looking into the zoning and ways to bring commercial and to rezone it for commercial and try to get some, I don't think the residential will ever go up there, but maybe there'll be some commercial up there, so maybe somehow make it part of their, whether it's in the MOA or the legislation, try to make it a requirement that they work with us to try to, come up with some compromises as far as the zoning goes. Does that make sense?
I'm on board.
So do you want to take that as a motion then to authorize the chair to work with council on proposed amendments to be submitted to the legislative delegation?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? So I'm doing this too? Okay, good.
You're on vacation again this week?
No, I'm not on vacation. I'm all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Okay. Abatement. I do have my concerns about this abatement issue too, but I guess that might be nothing we can do about that right now. Abington's gonna be in charge of the zoning up there if this legislation goes through. Representation and liquor license. Does anybody else have anything else they want to talk about or add to this at all, or? No?
Right, so do we want to schedule a meeting for Tuesday at this time at which we invite the Starwood officials to meet with us to, I think, basically come up with a final agreement?
Yeah, I don't think that would be a problem. But my question to you is, before we were negotiating, like, there was one representative of the board, and now, would it still be, and I don't know if they're gonna be willing to actually negotiate in public, would it be best to have a meeting, show our concerns, and then myself and council and town manager go into another room with them and then come back to the full board? Does that make sense?
That makes sense, and, we could do both. So we could, so here's the one issue is, right, time is obviously of the
Absolutely.
essence, but we've got constraints under the open meeting law. So the next time that you could meet as a board would be Tuesday. Or Tuesday morning, I guess, because notice could get posted
Yeah.
tomorrow. So let's say you post a meeting for, 6:30 again on Tuesday. Maybe we could say that, I don't know, is Rick going to be back by that point?
Yes.
Okay, so we can say that, the chair, the town manager, and council will meet with Starwood officials at 5:30 or 5.
Okay, because yes, he'll have what our recommendations are, and then we can meet with them. Okay, I see what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah.
And then come back to the board and say, this is what they're saying. And they can sit there and nod their heads and go,
Or they can talk, I think that, they should be in the position of justifying, their position, yeah. And they're saying that your concerns are adequately addressed. Let's let them explain to you and to the people who are watching at home, how that's so. And, and if people want to show up here and ask them questions, it's within the authority of the chair to allow that to happen.
put a lot of pressure on me again, all right.
Do you need a vote on that, or we just do it?
I've already got permission to meet with them, so I can,
No,
I have Tuesday off.
as far as scheduling the,
Oh,
selectmen's meeting
we'll
next
schedule
week.
one Tuesday, I think.
Yeah, you don't need a vote, but I'd like to I think it would be helpful to get at least a consensus on that.
Yeah,
Everybody able to make it on Tuesday?
There's a school building committee meeting at 6, but I'll leave that. I'm going to go to that, but I'll leave that early.
Okay. Do you know if Mike will be back?
He'll be back.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
We
he'll
could go
love that.
later than 6:30 if
That's
that's
fine.
more convenient for you.
I can go for 20 minutes and then come back.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I guess I'll entertain, does anybody, Joe, do you have anything to add before we close the meeting?
Good luck.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your input, we appreciate it. Thank you, Dory, for coming out. Thank you so much, Greg.
make a motion to
Chris,
adjourn.
thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris, sorry. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.